Every generation attempts to reshape the historical figure of Jesus to fit the mood of their era. Today, the preferred image is a misunderstood, wise teacher whose followers simply exaggerated his legacy. It is the most socially comfortable answer available. Treating him as a great moral philosopher creates a version of the story that requires no serious life changes and causes zero friction in modern conversation. But this archetype contains a massive structural flaw. Arriving at this highly simplified figure requires us to ignore or actively delete huge portions of the primary historical sources. We cannot build an accurate historical picture if our primary method is selectively removing the data that challenges our worldview. When we look at the intact texts, we find a person claiming the authority to forgive sins committed against other people. He places his own words on the same level of authority as the Torah and accepts worship from monotheistic followers without ever correcting them. A good moral teacher does not make these claims. They lead to a logical trilemma. The speaker is either accurately describing reality, suffering from a profound delusion, or consciously deceiving his hearers. This timeline maps the crucifixion against the earliest creedal material. High claims of divine identity, like Jesus sharing God's throne, are embedded in hymns dating to within years of his death. Legend simply does not move that fast. The speed and density of these first-century documents force us to confront the raw, unsanded data of who he actually claimed to be. The first stream of evidence is that Jesus deliberately applied the divine identity to himself, using absolute titles that echo the Hebrew scriptures. These claims grew natively within a first-century Jewish context that already had categories for such a figure. The reaction was immediate. Within 2 decades, Jewish followers, raised in a culture where worshiping anything but the one God was a capital crime, began praying to Jesus and singing hymns to him as a deity. Yet, side by side with these claims, the texts aggressively maintain his physical, gritty humanity. They completely refuse to portray him as a divine phantom. They record his physical exhaustion and genuine hunger. They show him in severe emotional distress, and even record him admitting to limited knowledge, the kind of details an early religious movement would never invent. Historians are left with a staggering paradox. The primary sources present a single individual who seamlessly occupies the identity of the creator, yet bleeds, sweats, and weeps like an ordinary man. We can anchor this paradox in historical bedrock. A real human being was brutally executed by the Roman Empire under Pontius Pilate. This is confirmed not just by his followers, but by hostile Roman and Jewish writers. Then we have the minimal facts of what followed: an empty tomb, reported group appearances, and the conversions of active opponents who had nothing to gain from a lie. The movement exploded in Jerusalem, the one city where the claim could have been instantly falsified by producing a body. Instead, the movement's growth forced the authorities to invent a counter-narrative to explain why the tomb was empty. The resurrection is a single explanation that handles all these facts simultaneously. It acts as the historical anchor, the event that, if true, explains why this movement survived and why they took his category-breaking identity claim seriously. The early church struggled with this paradox for centuries, continually trying and failing to find a simpler answer that didn't fracture the evidence. If we test the hypothesis that he was only a man, the internal logic breaks. His claims become megalomania. If we test the opposite, that he was only God, the historical person disappears, and the gritty gospel textures dissolve into play acting. These simpler answers were not rejected because of church politics. They were set aside because every attempt to simplify the data destroyed the integrity of the primary sources themselves. The convergent evidence pushes us towards the only option that preserves the entire dataset, fully man and fully God. It preserves the claims, the worship, and the history. The only trade-off is our conceptual simplicity. The famous historical definition, 2 natures in one person, is not an engineered riddle. It is a protective fence built around the only shape that fits all the evidence. This leads to a staggering reality. The one who upholds the universe actually had calluses on his hands and walked through a specific Roman province at a specific point in time. The accumulated evidence brings us right to the edge of the historical case file, but it doesn't close it. It returns the ultimate burden of proof to the viewer with the one question that remains unresolved. Who do you say that I am?